Dad? Dad? What are you doing?
I'm just playing guitar.
Well, I can barely hear you.
Have you ever looked at all the gear musicians use and wonder, how does it all work? My name's Dustin, and my family and I are setting out on a quest to inspire both adult and kid musicians to create new sounds together and learn all about what it takes to produce great music. We'd like to invite you along on the journey as we explore the gear professional studios, musicians, and hobbyists use to create their art. We'll take a close-up look at the gear and ask,
What's this button do?
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of What's This Button Do? I'm your host, Dustin, and today we're going to be talking about a subject near and dear to my heart, silent recording. Now, this is something that has been a challenge for musicians since the dawn of time. I know growing up, when I first got my very first electric guitar amp, I remember being so excited. It was a old Line 6 Axe 2, which had all these cool effects in it, and it could do distortion, and it could do heavy metal, and it could do rock, and it had delays built into it. And I got it home, and I turned it up, and I started to play a chord, and immediately my parents were like, hey, turn that down, it's way too loud. And that was a phrase that I heard for the next 25 years of my life. I moved to an apartment when I went on to college, and same thing. Neighbors could hear it. Even if I had the amp turned up to a 2, they could hear it. And they were like, we need you to turn down your amp. And of course, being a college student, when you're working during the day, about the only time you can play is at night. And if you've got any family, and those of you with kids, you know this, the last thing you want to do is wake them up after they've finally gotten tucked in at night. And so I needed to find a solution to be able to have a home studio, to be able to record and still capture the magic of some of these tube amps that you see behind you. But believe me, when I say trying to run a Soldano into any kind of emulation is just not going to get you the same feel as a Soldano in the room, or so I thought. Then along comes 2 new products, the Universal Audio Aux Box and the Boss Waza tube amp expander. These 2 items absolutely changed the way that I approach guitar and recording and really what I thought was possible. Now, I know what you're saying. Those are kind of pricey items. They are both at about the same price point, but they're a little bit more expensive. They're about the price of buying an actual amp itself. But I'm hoping today by showing you what you can do with those, you'll see the benefit of that. But don't think that this is just about those 2 items. Really, the whole point of this is to tell you that things have changed so much with IR loaders and with plugins. It is amazing. Neural DSP has some of the most amazing technology where you can load up an entire amp rig into your computer, plug your guitar into your interface, and record an amazing sound through there. You can also do the same thing with Mixwave. They have a plugin for Benson amps that is just absolutely phenomenal. So there's lots of other ways to do this, but I'm going to show you the 2 that I think capture the true tube amp sound the most realistically and show you how I use them. I'm also going to show you the features and benefits of both. So we're going to take a look at the Universal Audio Aux first. I'm going to show you the interface that you use with it in order to program it, and show you a few of the sounds that you can get through it. And then I'm also going to show you the same thing with the Boss Waza tube amp expander so you can see how that interface works as well. So let's jump into the Universal Audio one first. Now, the Universal Audio Aux Box is one of the most ingenious contraptions that you'll ever see. At first look, it's very simple. If you look at this front panel here, you've basically got just a few features. You've got your line volume, you've got your room volume, you've got your settings to a rotary system that lets you select which preset you want to have. And then you have your line outs and you have your headphone outs. Now, the real beauty of this lies in it serves 2 purposes. Not only is it a way to direct record silently into your interface, it also has an attenuator built in. And both this and the Boss Waza have this feature where you can have this placed between your amplifier and your speaker cabinet, and you can attenuate down to almost no sound whatsoever coming out. And it does a pretty good job of keeping it. If you've got your amp cranked all the way up and you're pushing it into a little drive, or you're using a fuzz pedal with it or a distortion pedal to really get it pounding, you can turn it down to a volume where it will stay in the room that you're in and not leak out to the other rooms surrounding you or to your apartment. So it's a great way to turn an amp way down when you normally wouldn't be able to do that and still get the compression and the neat sounds that you want. But where I really find it shines is by using it to silently record directly into your interface. So I don't even have a cabinet plugged into it. It uses a reactive load to provide a speaker load to your amplifier, which is so important. And for those of you who are new to this, never, ever, ever plug an amplifier directly into an interface without some kind of load going to it, a load box of some kind. You will blow up your amplifier. It will ruin it. So your amplifiers always have to see some form of load coming from a speaker in order for it to pass that current. And this was a major problem for a lot of things. When they first came out, when load boxes first came out, they were overheating amplifiers. They're having a lot of issues. But that technology has come so far now. I have been recording with these since they first came out, and I've never had one go bad on me. I've never had it damage an amp. So it really is amazing to see what they can do nowadays. But you can plug your amp directly into here, have it cranked as loud as you want, and you will not hear a sound in the room. That little demo at the beginning that you heard, I was playing. All of that sound was what was coming through my headphones in the interface. None of that was being heard in the room. So it really is an amazing feature. Now let's take a look at the software itself, because the software for the Universal Audio is absolutely amazing. We're going to hop into the computer now. So we're going to take a look at the Universal Audio aux software at first. So here's just a basic clean signal coming through a clean Soldano amplifier running in here. You'll see there's multiple different channels here. What we have over on your left-hand side is you have, whether it's a 50 watt or 100 watt amp, and you can drive that amp coming into the speaker. So it kind of lets you push the speakers a little bit toward breakup so you can get a little extra edge to the sound. It's not a major amount. Then your main microphone, you can control the volume of it, so you can push it up, you can push it down, just to tell you exactly what level you want to have it at. And you can select from a ton of different modeled amplifiers. Now, this is not like an IR. You can't load your own microphones in. This already has a preset selection of both microphones and speakers, but you can go through and select a ton of different sounds here. They've got some 2-rock cabinets in here that are absolutely amazing. Old blue Alnicos. There's just an absolute ton of emulations, and because it's Universal Audio, you know they do a phenomenal job. It's just absolutely crystal clear and impeccable IRs. The only negative to this is if you have a bunch of IRs from like York or Ownhammer that you want to load into this, it doesn't really work with those, because the way that the Universal aux box is designed, it is not just an IR. You've got the sound of your speaker and then how it interacts with multiple different mics. You can even change the positioning of the mics. You can change the polarity of them. You can change whether they're off axis, on axis. You can set up different microphone configurations. And so all of those play into your sound. It's not just the one IR that you're using. This is a whole bunch of IRs interfacing together to give you these different sounds. So there's a ton of different versions here, but you can't really use external sourcing. Now, the other thing that Universal Audio gives you is their effects. So they have a plate reverb that's absolutely outstanding. You can hear the difference here, how it just kind of gets a little quieter. Then they have their own delay. I love that sound. Then they also have an amazing compressor in here. This is based on the old UA compressors, and you can hear the difference in sound here when you turn it on. See how it gives you that great tube warmth there? It's just an amazing sound to it. And then, of course, an EQ, like we discussed last week, you're actually able to go through here and get a little bit of EQ, so you can raise the bottom end. Like here, I had the bottom washed out a little bit, have those top frequencies boosted. And you can activate or deactivate all of these at any time. I like to leave it right around here. Now, the other thing you have is you have a set of room mics, and these kind of give you a little extra ambience. And I find when you crank them, listen to that. You hear that little bit of almost tube rattle? You can hear this like sweetness that happens when I raise that volume up. Almost sounds like that microphonic sound that a tube starts to make. It gives it such a realistic, warm, actual sound, like you're hearing that amp, not through an effects processor, but it's like it's really in the room with you. And that's where I found the Universal Audio absolutely shines. This gives you, on a clean tone, some of the most realistic tone I've ever heard from an amp. I absolutely love this for cleans. Now, when you get into fuzzes and drives and distortions, because you're dealing with emulation here, you start to lose some things. Those speakers are very clearly, pristinely recorded, and so you have to do a lot of playing with that if you're going to try to add drive pedals, if you're going to try to add a lot of distortion to it. Now, for distortion and drives, what I found is the Boss Waza tube amp expander is absolutely phenomenal. So we're going to look at that next. Now, the Boss Waza tube amp expander is a completely different animal. This is really designed to be both a reactive load box and a direct recording tool, but they put a little bit more focus on the whole reactive load box. If you look in the upper left-hand controls, you'll see that they have a resonance filter in there. They have some different settings that you can do just to make sure that your load is coming through and still sounding good through the speakers, even if you have the amplifier turned down a lot. This will help you to increase the presence, because as you turn down an amplifier, you always lose a little bit of that sound that you're, especially on a driven amp. This allows you to compensate for that by adding a little bit more resonance, adding a little bit more presence, and really make it sound like the sound you were hearing when it was turned really loud, but you've just turned that sound down. So it's great as a reactive load box. But again, I also love to use it as a direct recording tool. So we're going to take a look at the interface and how that works. On the front of the panel, you'll notice it has an easy rotary, so you can switch through up to 10 different presets, which is a really nice thing. The aux only has 6 presets, so you get a few more presets on the front end. With the Boss Waza. You also have direct access to change, they have a line out so that you can make an effects loop that you drop in between the preamp and the power amp section. It's really cool. You can kind of create your own little effects loop in there. They have a routing system you can do. They have effects that you can turn on and off from the external box, so you don't have to boot up the software that I'm going to show you in a minute, which is a fantastic thing for it. And then, of course, you have your line level out, so you can control how much is being sent to your interface. And then you also have your volume that you can control on your speakers. And with an excellent clipping light that shows you when you're pushing it too much, when you're putting too much power out of there. So fantastic interface from the front end. I think they really nailed it, the way that it can be used. But I want to dive into the software a little bit and let you hear it. And I also want to show you why I think this is one of the best metal boxes for anybody who is using metal or heavier music. You're going to absolutely love it. So let's dig into the software. All right, now this is what the interface looks like for the Boss Waza tube expander. You'll notice it's a little bit different than the Universal Audio. It's not quite the beautiful GUI system. This is a very simple, no bells and whistles here. This is just telling you exactly what you're doing. So you have a routing path for your signal. And the first part is basically what's happening directly after your amp. So you've got your amplifier. It can go through a compressor. It can go through different effects. You can put a delay in there if you want to. And Boss has included a bunch of different emulations of some of their more popular delays. Then on the bottom here, it's got an EQ system that you can choose parametric or graphic EQs. For those who watched last week's episode, you can actually choose your own graphic EQ and slide it up just like we did last week, and use a lot of the same settings that you would have gotten from the Boss EQ 200. And gotta say, it really does work. It's a little different frequency range than what they use on the 200, but very effective. And then the parametric is more to really boost certain groups of signals and bring them through, so you can do some really interesting editing there. Then they have, of course, some extra effects that you can include in there. You've got an effects loop where you can route it out to pedals if you want to. And then you can also control the amount of line level that's going out to the amplifier, and also the amount of line level that's going out to your recording interface. So you can change that how you see fit. And you can completely mute it out if you don't want anything going to the line out if you want to. So you can really adjust this however you want. Sounds absolutely amazing, clean. But what I love is you can load IRs into here. So if you've got, I use Ownhammer for a lot of my stuff. You can bring in an Ownhammer IR. You don't have to use the Boss emulations. So if you've got some good external IRs, you can really make something that will allow you to push an amp and create something really unique. Now, by using internal IRs, you can pre-program them in there, so you can see in here, I've got several of my favorite IRs. So here's some of the Ownhammers on here. If I scroll up, I've got a ton of things, some York, some Ownhammers, and then some that just friends have given me that are just really interesting. So you can go through and change from a wealth of different settings, and then you can save any of those when you make your presets. You can save any of the 10 presets on the left-hand side, and then you'll be able to easily recall them whenever you have it. Now, here's what it sounds like with distortion. this is where having your own IRs can make a massive world of difference. A lot of times these digital IRs that come prepackaged with these will not handle that heavier riffing. Whereas these allow you to add in some designs like these own hammers that were designed for metal specifically, and you can hear that clarity that allows you to do the squeals. So I hope that helps you to see the difference between the Universal Audio aux and the Boss Waza tube expander. They're very similar products and they do a lot of the same thing. They just go about it a little differently. Universal Audio has those cleaner interfaces with a lot more of an interactive feel where you can move the mics around, you can play around with the different settings, where the Boss is a more straightforward design, but it allows you to load your own IRs and mess around with effects a little bit more. So just depending on what you need, you can kind of play with those two. I would say for clean tones and for basic rock, I'm absolutely in love with the Universal Audio aux. For heavier music and things that are going to push an amp, and especially if you're using a 100-watt amp and you're really pushing the gain in there, I find that the Boss Waza tube amp just absolutely can take a 100-watt Soldano all day long and it doesn't even start to clip. So it's amazing what you can get out of there. But I think both are absolutely wonderful devices and have a ton of uses. I use both of them in my mixes. We're going to look at this in a future episode. I actually play a wet, dry, wet rig. So I use 3 amps running with interfaces. And so I'm going to show you why I do that and how you can do that even if you only have 1 amp, how you can use it to make 3 different sounds and blend them together. We'll be looking at that in a future episode. Well, thank you as always for spending your time with us today. We really appreciate it. Make sure you follow us on at What's This Button Do, Dustin, on Instagram. And please, if you have your own IRs, you have your own use for these items, or maybe you don't use the Universal Audio and you don't use the Boss, but you have some favorite plugins that you use so that you can record directly and silently at home. You use Mixwave or Neural, or maybe you've got the new Neural DSP. That's something that I'm going to be checking out in a future episode. But we'd love to hear what you're using in order to keep the volume down at home. So please comment down below. Let us know what that is so we can kind of share that with the group and talk about it in the comments. And as always, I'd love to thank my friends at Palen Music for putting on our show. It's absolutely wonderful, the help that they've given to us to broadcast these out there. If you have a chance to go into their shop and take a look, make sure if you're in the area to swing by and say hi to everybody over there. And if not, visit palenmusic.com. The link's down below. I'm sure they'd love to hear from you on there as well. Thank you all so much for coming out. Next week, we're going to be doing a guitar spotlight on a master-built Fender guitar, so it should be a really fun time. So please join us for that if you have time. Thank you so much and have a wonderful week.